Right now, if you hooked your dog up to a heart monitor and hooked yourself up to one too, something strange would start to happen. Not right away, but within a few quiet minutes together, on the couch, on the floor, wherever you two actually rest, the two lines would start to move together. That's not a metaphor. It's not you two are in tune in some poetic sense. Researchers have now measured this directly, in real dogs and real owners, with real heart monitors. And here's the part that should stop you for a second. It isn't just your heart rate that does this. Your stress hormone levels measured over months, not minutes, rise and fall together too. Your dog's body is quietly tracking yours, constantly, whether or not either of you notices. That's the real question underneath every 11 signs your dog loves you video you've ever watched, not which behavior to count. Whether the two of you have built something your bodies can prove exists, even when neither of you says a word. In the next 20-some minutes, I'm going to show you 3 separate measurements: heart rhythm, short-term hormones, and long-term stress, where science can now show a bonded dog and owner literally syncing up. And at the end, I'm going to give you the same test researchers use, so you can find out where you and your dog actually stand. This is PetMindLabs. Let's stop guessing and start seeing. Let's be honest about something first. You've probably already watched a video like this. Tail wags, leaning, licking, eye contact, sleeping near you, bringing you a toy. Every one of those gets called proof your dog loves you. And every one of those can also mean something completely different: arousal, hunger, an itch, a request for the door. That's the actual problem with the sign counting approach. A behavior is ambiguous. You're reading a single frame and guessing at the whole movie. It's why 2 different dog channels can watch the exact same lean and call it trust, or call it anxiety, and both sound confident. So here's the reframe for this video. Instead of asking which behavior means love, we're going to ask a completely different kind of question, one that doesn't rely on reading body language at all. What if, instead of watching what your dog does, we measured what your dog's body does, underneath the behavior, in real time? That's a fundamentally different kind of evidence. A tail wag is an opinion. A synchronized heart rate is a measurement. And it turns out, once researchers started actually attaching heart monitors to dogs and their owners at the same time, not just one or the other, which is what almost every older study did, they found something that no single sign ever could have shown them. Before we get into it, I want to be upfront about what this video is not. This is not going to tell you that if your dog doesn't sync with you, it doesn't love you. Bonds are built differently by different dogs, different histories, different nervous systems. A rescue dog with a hard start in life is not going to regulate the same way a dog raised from 8 weeks old will. What this video will do is show you the actual physiological architecture underneath the bond, the wiring, not the wallpaper, so you understand what's really happening the next time your dog curls up next to you and, for no obvious reason, seems to finally exhale. Let's start with the newest piece of this puzzle, because it's the most direct measurement anyone has ever taken. In late 2024, a research team at the University of Jyväskylä in Finland ran a study most pet content channels haven't touched yet. They recruited 30 dog and owner pairs, mostly cooperative working breeds, sheepdogs and retrievers, the kind of dogs bred for centuries to read and respond to a human partner. And instead of measuring just the dog or just the owner, the way almost every earlier study had done, they measured both of them at the exact same time, using heart monitors on each. That detail matters more than it sounds like it should. For decades, most of the research on dogs and stress, dogs and bonding, dogs and emotion, only ever put a sensor on the dog. Occasionally, a separate study would put a sensor on the human. Almost nobody put sensors on both members of the same pair, running at the same time, so the 2 data streams could actually be compared against each other, beat for beat. That's the equivalent of studying a conversation by only ever recording one person talking. You can learn things that way, but you can't see the exchange. This study was built specifically to catch the exchange. The setup itself was simple by design. Each pair went through a series of everyday interactions, resting quietly with nothing to do, being stroked, doing a short training exercise, sniffing around a room freely, and playing. Nothing exotic, nothing lab artificial. Just an ordinary stretch of time that could have happened in anyone's living room. And the whole time, both hearts were being recorded. What they were tracking specifically is called heart rate variability, HRV for short. It's not how fast your heart beats, it's how much the spacing between beats varies from one beat to the next. That sounds like a small technical detail, but it's actually one of the best windows we have into the nervous system. High HRV generally means a body that's relaxed, recovered, and flexible. Low HRV means a body that's under strain, stressed, alert, bracing for something. So here's what they found. During quiet, unstructured time together, no task, no command, just being in the same room, the owner's HRV and the dog's HRV moved together. When the owner's body settled into a relaxed state, the dog's body did too. And it wasn't only heart rate that did this. Physical activity levels synced as well, especially during more active moments like play when the owner moved more, the dog moved more, practically in step. Now, you might be thinking, of course, a resting owner has a resting dog next to them. Isn't that just because a calm room is calm for everyone in it? That's a fair question, and the researchers thought of it too. They specifically checked whether this synchrony could just be explained by shared physical activity, both bodies moving less, so both heart rates naturally settling. It couldn't. The heart rate connection was strongest during the free, resting periods, when there was no shared task driving both bodies to do the same thing. Which means what synced wasn't just movement. It was something closer to a shared emotional state. Two nervous systems settling into the same register, side by side, with nothing forcing them to. Think about how different that is from every other kind of evidence you've been offered before. A tail wag is visible from across the room, and it's still ambiguous once you get there. Heart rate variability is invisible from across the room, and it's almost impossible to fake. Your dog can choose to wag its tail at a stranger for a treat. Its autonomic nervous system does not perform on command. That's exactly why researchers reach for this kind of measurement in the first place, not because it's more dramatic, but because it's much harder to argue with. And here's the detail that made this study genuinely surprising to the people who ran it, the kind of finding that overturns the assumption most of us walk in with. You'd probably guess that the owner sets the emotional tone and the dog follows it. Calm owner, calm dog. That's the story every dog training book tells you, and it's not wrong, exactly. But when the researchers ran the statistics both directions, the strongest predictor wasn't the owner's heart rate explaining the dog's. It was the other way around. The dog's heart rate variability was the best predictor of the owner's. Read that twice, because it matters. Your dog isn't just passively absorbing your mood like a sponge. Its nervous system appears to be an active input into yours. The relationship runs in both directions, and if anything, the dog's side of the loop may be doing more of the steering than we assumed. That upends a pretty common belief. I need to calm down first, and then my dog will calm down. The dog's body may be shaping yours just as much as yours shapes theirs. There was one more wrinkle worth knowing, because it's the kind of detail that makes a study trustworthy instead of tidy. The researchers found that owners who scored higher on a trait called negative affectivity, a tendency to worry, to notice threats, to feel things more intensely, tended to have dogs with especially high heart rate variability around them, and tended to report a particularly strong bond. One reading of that, dogs paired with a more anxious owner may actually work harder, physiologically, to provide a sense of safety. And in doing so, some of those pairs build an unusually tight, two-way loop. Not proof of anything universal, just a real thread the data left behind, worth sitting with instead of smoothing over. That first study captured something happening in real time, minute to minute, but there's a second, completely different kind of synchrony, one that isn't about a single afternoon together. It's about months. In 2019, a team at Linköping University in Sweden ran a study that measured something most people have never heard of, hair cortisol. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone, and unlike a blood or saliva sample, which tells you about stress in the last few minutes, cortisol that gets deposited into growing hair tells you about stress levels over the entire period that hair was growing, weeks, sometimes months. The researchers collected hair samples from 58 dog and owner pairs, 2 different times, roughly 6 months apart, so they could compare a summer reading against a winter one. And they compared the long-term stress hormone levels of each dog to the long-term stress hormone levels of its own specific owner. The result? They matched. Owners running a high-stress season had dogs running a high-stress season. Owners running calmer months had dogs running calmer months. Not perfectly, biology never lines up perfectly, but the pattern was clear enough, and it held up as one of the first pieces of evidence that this kind of long-term stress synchronization happens across species at all, not just between two people who live together. What makes this study particularly hard to wave away is who the researchers included. The 58 pairs weren't a random grab bag of dogs. They deliberately balanced the sample between 2 breeds, Shetland sheepdogs and border collies, and between 2 very different lifestyles. Some were ordinary pet dogs with an ordinary routine, and others were actively competing in agility or obedience, meaning a physically demanding, high-pressure schedule most pet dogs never see. Even across that spread of breed and lifestyle, the owner-dog stress match still held up. That's the kind of detail that turns interesting coincidence into a pattern worth taking seriously. And the researchers' own read on the direction was blunt. Their working theory is that dogs are mirroring their owner's long-term stress more than the other way around. Which means the dog living in your house isn't just reacting to how your day went. There's evidence its baseline stress physiology may be shaped by the general emotional climate of your life, your job, your relationships, the season you're in, even when you think you're hiding it well. That's worth sitting with for a second, because it reframes something. If your dog seems a little more unsettled during a hard stretch of your life, that's not your dog being difficult. That may be measurable evidence of exactly the kind of bond this whole video is about. A nervous system tuned closely enough to yours that it's tracking your stress levels, the way a family member's would. There's a third piece, and this one shows the sync working as protection, not just mirroring. In 2013, researchers at Eötvös Loránd University in Hungary ran a study on what's called the safe haven effect, a concept borrowed directly from human-infant attachment research where a securely attached child's stress response is measurably lower when their parent is present during something scary. They tested 30 dogs with heart monitors attached and exposed each one to a mildly threatening stranger, someone approaching in an unfamiliar, slightly intimidating way. Sometimes the dog faced this alone, sometimes with the owner standing right there, and they tracked exactly how much the dog's heart rate spiked in each condition. The dog's heart rate still went up when the stranger approached. That startle response doesn't disappear just because you're nearby. But the spike was significantly smaller when the owner was present than when the dog faced it alone. Your presence didn't erase the stress. It measurably dampened it, which is precisely the signature researchers look for in a human parent-child bond. Not the disappearance of fear, but a buffered, softened version of it, because there's now a second nervous system in the room, helping carry the load. There was a second finding buried in that same study that's just as interesting. The order in which a dog experienced the two conditions mattered. Dogs that faced the stranger with their owner present first, and only faced the same stranger alone afterward, showed a smaller heart rate spike, even in the alone condition, as if the earlier, buffered experience had left a kind of residue, a little extra resilience carried forward. That hints at something bigger than a single moment of comfort. It suggests that a strong bond doesn't just soften stress while it's happening. It may build a dog's capacity to handle the next hard moment too, even without you standing right there. This sits on top of something researchers had already shown a decade earlier, that dogs tend to treat their owner as what attachment psychology calls a secure base. In studies, going back to the late 1990s, dogs placed in an unfamiliar room explored more freely, braver, more curious when their owner was present, and grew visibly more cautious the moment that owner left. That's not a personality quirk. It's the same basic pattern seen in a toddler exploring a new room with a parent nearby versus without one. So, layer these three findings on top of each other, because that's really the whole argument of this video. In real time, together, your heart rhythms settle into each other, and the dog's side of that loop may be doing more of the work than you'd expect. Over months, your baseline stress hormones drift in the same direction, season after season. And in a moment of real threat, your dog's stress response is measurably smaller simply because you're standing there. 3 separate labs, 3 separate measurement tools, a heart monitor, a strand of hair, a stranger on a leash walk, and all 3 land on the same underlying picture. This is not a feeling floating in the air between you. It's wired into both of your nervous systems. So if the sync is real, here's the reframe worth sitting with. It means love, in the biological sense this channel cares about, was never really about what your dog does. It's about what your dog's body has learned to do with yours, a nervous system that has, over time, wired itself to track another species' internal state so closely that a machine can pick up the correlation. That's a genuinely different definition than the one most content gives you. Most videos frame love as a performance, a dog doing something for you, a gift, a display, a greeting. What the physiology actually shows is closer to co-regulation, 2 nervous systems that have learned to lean on each other, quietly, automatically, most of the time, without either side doing anything you'd notice on camera at all. The most convincing proof of the bond isn't a dramatic behavior. It's often the most boring moment in your whole house, 2 bodies just sitting there, breathing in the same rhythm, doing nothing that would ever make it into an 11 Signs video. And here's the honest asterisk. Because a channel built on evidence has to include the part that complicates the pretty story re-engagement beat, right here. An earlier line of research, going back to a 2003 study out of the University of Pretoria, found that when owners petted and talked to their own dog, both of them showed a rise in oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and the owner's cortisol dropped. But the same researchers also found this effect was noticeably stronger with a familiar dog than with a stranger's dog, which tells you something important. The sync isn't automatic just because a dog and a human are in the same room. It's built. It comes from an established relationship, not the mere presence of a dog. And later work in this same space suggests the style of touch may matter too, that slow, calm stroking and talking tend to track with the relaxed, bonding side of this picture, while quick, high-energy patting can sometimes do the opposite, nudging a dog's stress hormones up instead of down. That part of the science is still being refined, so I won't hand you a fake, precise number for it, but the honest shape of it is worth knowing. The sync we've been describing this whole video isn't a magic side effect of ownership. It's built through the quality of specific, repeated, gentle interaction, and it can probably be undermined by the wrong kind of interaction too. Which means the real headline of this video isn't, "Your dog's body proves it loves you, guaranteed." It's this: the bond you've built slowly, through thousands of ordinary, forgettable moments of just being near each other calmly, is the actual mechanism that creates a measurable, physiological sync. You didn't need the sync to prove the love. The relationship you were already living is what built the sync. There's a comparison worth making here, because it lands the point better than any more studies could. Think about a long-married couple who spent decades together, the ones who finish each other's sentences, who reach for the same mug at the same time without looking, whose moods visibly settle just from being in the same room. Nobody looks at that couple and says the sync is fake because it isn't a single dramatic gesture. We recognize it as the evidence of everything that came before it, years of ordinary Tuesdays, not one grand day. What the research in this video suggests is that something structurally similar is available between a person and a dog. Not identical. A dog's cognitive world is not a human partner's, but built from the same basic ingredient: a nervous system, given enough safe, repeated time, near another one, to learn its rhythms. Given enough of that, on either side of the leash, physiology starts to answer a question words never could. So here's how to actually use this. Not just watch it and feel something, but test it, tonight, the same rough way researchers do. You don't need lab equipment to get a rough read on this. Sit or lie down somewhere your dog is free to approach, or not approach, floor, couch, wherever you two actually rest. No phone, no task, no cues, no calling your dog over. Just be still for 5 full minutes and let your dog choose what to do. Watch what happens to your own body first. Are you actually able to settle, breathing slower, shoulders dropping, or is some part of you still running? That matters, because the Jyväskylä study found the strongest heart rate connection during exactly this kind of unstructured, resting time, not during play, not during training, during stillness. If you can't get still, you're not giving the sync a fair chance to show up. Then look at your dog. A dog that's genuinely settling alongside you will show slower, deeper breathing, a loose jaw, soft or closed eyes, a body that gets heavier against the floor or against you, rather than staying alert and ready to move. A dog that's simply near you but not settling will often stay upright, ears mobile, eyes tracking the room, body still slightly tensed, physically present, but not physiologically joining you. Neither one is a verdict on whether your dog loves you. A dog that just came in from a walk, or that's naturally more vigilant by temperament or breed, may take longer to drop into that state, or may almost never fully do it in a 5-minute window, and that says more about arousal level and personality than about the relationship. But over many repeats of this same time, same place, over weeks you'll start to notice a pattern, and that pattern is the closest at-home version of what the Jyväskylä researchers were measuring with their heart monitors. A quick, honest note on wearables. If you happen to own a smartwatch or fitness tracker with heart rate variability built in, and a dog-safe pet wearable that also tracks HRV, you can get closer to an actual number instead of a felt impression. You won't get lab-grade data, consumer devices are noisier, and dog collars measure differently than the chest strap sensors researchers use. But watching your own HRV trend upward during that 5-minute stillness window is a real, if rough, echo of exactly what the study captured. You don't need this step. It's a bonus for the more data-curious pet parent, not a requirement for anyone else. You don't need to recreate a lab safety test, and please don't deliberately frighten your dog to check anything. But you've almost certainly already run a version of the safe haven test by accident: the mail carrier, a knock at the door, a sudden loud sound outside. Next time it happens, Notice how quickly your dog checks back in with you, and how quickly it settles once it does. A dog that startles, glances at you, and downshifts within a few seconds is showing you a live, real-world version of that. Eötvös Loránd finding your presence, measurably dampening its stress response. Right there in your kitchen, no lab required. Because the Linköping study found synchrony over months, not minutes, it's worth asking a slower question than, is my dog stressed today? If you're moving through a genuinely hard stretch, a demanding season at work, a loss, a move, and you notice your dog seems a little more unsettled than usual, more clingy, sleeping a little worse, a little more reactive to small things, consider that this might not be a coincidence, and it's almost certainly not bad behavior. It may be the long-term hormone synchrony this video just walked you through, showing up in real time in your own home. That's not a reason to panic. It's a reason to protect some calm, boring, together time for both of you, because that ordinary time is the mechanism, not a side activity. This is also, honestly, one of the more useful things you can bring to your own vet if your dog starts showing unexplained changes, looser stools, less appetite, more clinginess, a new sensitivity to noise, right around a period when your own life has been unusually hard. It doesn't replace a real veterinary workup, and it should never be your first assumption if something seems physically wrong. But it's a genuinely useful piece of context for a vet visit, because it points at a why, and a why often changes what happens next. Sometimes the most effective intervention for your dog's stress is stabilizing yours. Last one, and it's the simplest. If you want to actively build this bond rather than just observe it, the research points towards slow, calm, sustained contact over quick, high-energy contact. A long, slow stroke down the length of the body, paired with a low, calm voice, tends to track with the relaxed, bonding side of the physiology we've covered tonight. Fast, excited patting, wrestling, and high arousal play absolutely have their place in a dog's life. Dogs need that too. But if your specific goal in a given moment is co-regulation, slow wins. 2 minutes of unhurried, quiet contact, once a day, with no agenda attached, is a small, doable habit that lines up with everything the evidence in this video actually showed. Here's what I keep coming back to. For most of human history, does my dog love me, was a question you could only answer with a guess, a warm feeling, a story you told yourself while looking at a wagging tail. That's not nothing. But it also isn't proof. And for the first time, we actually have proof, or at least the closest thing biology can offer. 2 heart rates finding the same rhythm in a quiet room. 2 stress hormone curves rising and falling together across an entire season. A heartbeat that spikes a little less, simply because you happen to be standing there. None of that requires your dog to do anything performative at all. It doesn't need a trick, a greeting, a gift. The realest version of this bond might be happening right now, in the most unremarkable moment in your house. You, on the couch, doing nothing, and your dog, somewhere nearby, quietly matching you. If this changed how you think about what love from your dog actually looks like, do me a favor. Tonight, try the 5-minute stillness test, and tell me in the comments what you noticed. Did your dog settle with you, or stay alert? There's no wrong answer. I read every one. If you want to keep learning to see what's actually happening in your dog's body, instead of guessing at what's happening in its head, subscribe, because at PetMindLabs, that's the whole point. We turn the real physiology of the human-dog bond into something you can actually watch happening on your own living room floor. Next time, we're staying with this same bond. From a different angle, why your dog seems to pick one specific person in a multi-person household, and what the science says is actually driving that choice. I'm glad you're here. This is PetMindLabs. Stop guessing. Start seeing.